Hey, so thanks for sending along the data logs. I thought I would walk a little review of the three logs with you in the video, make things a little bit easier to see what I'm seeing and understand that as we look at this revision 007. So first log here we're looking at is the cold start idle log, which is pretty good. I found something that we can change, but if we're looking at the top here, we've got the red line is the O2 target, green line is the actual AFR, and the yellow line is the short-term feedback. Then in the second swim lane, we've got throttle position, RPM, and in the third swim lane, we've got the coolant temp and the air temp. So we know this was the cold start idle log because our coolant temp is here at about 43 degrees. If we look here in the first 30 seconds of the data log, once the car got started, we can see that our AFR is really, really rich, 8.5. So it's pretty much as far down as the gauge will go on this 14.5 target. And car's idling at about 1300. And throttle position stays steady, so that's good. But I think in this first 30 seconds, this is actually our warm-up enrichment area. And see, because it ends at about 30 seconds. So we look at this, and we'll look again in the warm idle log. We have pretty much the same phenomena. So I'll tell you about what I think I'm going to change there. Once we get past that 30-second warm-up enrichment, then the AFRs start to come in line. It's about 13 AFR on a 14.5 target, which is pretty appropriate considering that our coolant temp is still here just about 45 degrees. And you'll notice we have no O2 feedback, which is also the case because O2 feedback doesn't come into play until we reach about 140 degrees. So to scroll through the right here, we can see our AFR is rich but not terrible. It's about 13. Even if it goes down to 12 or even 11 plus, well, here we are in the 12s. There was a little blip of 11, but mostly in the 12s here. That is okay considering that our coolant temperature is down here less than 140. Right here, we're going to see in a moment the coolant temperature is going to reach 140 degrees. And when it does, let me scroll back over there. When it does, our O2 feedback will kick in. And we'll see that it's going to start pulling fuel out. We see it's pulled out about 14%. And immediately we fall right in line. Our 14.1 AFR on the 14.5 target is good at 141 degrees. And thereafter, for the rest of the log, sorry, I keep having to scroll back to this point. For the rest of the log, O2 feedback continues to maintain us at about that 14.5. In fact, right here, we're right on target, 14.526 on the 14.526 target. Certainly, we have more O2 feedback than I'd like to have, but considering this is idle, I don't usually concern myself so much with this. As long as it's not maxed out on the O2 feedback and we're able to stay in line, that's pretty good. So for a cold start, I'm kind of satisfied with this, other than that first 30 seconds we talked about. Okay, so next, let's switch over to the warm idle log. I've got that here. I'll load up the warm idle log, and we're going to wait for it to load up here on the screen. We'll talk about what we're seeing here. All right, so again, coming back to that first 30 seconds, 30-second warm-up enrichment, as we talked about, we're running at this 8.5 or basically maximum richness. I have some things I will change in the warm-up under the start portion of the tuning that we'll see if we can bring this down, and maybe that's just the total impact at the beginning of the starting. However, once we're past that 30 seconds, O2 feedback starts to become a little bit more appropriate, and we'll see that again our AFRs are right in line with our target. This green line over top of the red line is always a good sign. It's what we were looking for. And as we scroll over here to the right, and we get through a little bit further here, now the O2 feedback is a minus 2.5, and soon it will kind of cross over here and start adding in fuel, which is common for it to go from subtracting fuel, adding fuel for a period of time. But all in all, I mean, you can see it's really at a plus just 6% fuel adder here. 5.5, 5.8, and then it's going to come back down here to about 2.955. So all of this is really ideal on this warm idle. We're just within that plus minus 5%. It's idyllic. And so again, I don't have any problems at all with idle other than the first 30 seconds. So we'll make some changes there in warm-up enrichment. So with those things in mind, here's some changes we're going to make on your startup calibration so that we're not running so rich. So the first thing we look at, you got a start extra versus temp calibration tool here. And so this is looking at an extra percentage of fuel that's going to be added based on the coolant temperature. And then we also have a start extra decay. This is the countdown timer. So let's say this is number of seconds and this is the coolant temperature. So this is how long we'll run that extra fuel on startup based on the temperature of the coolant. So for your car, really, once you're at 140 degrees, it's fully warmed up. It doesn't need any extra fuel. So we'll do it at this point is we'll take all of these values from 140 degrees on over, and we'll set those to 0. So there's no extra time-based fuel being added. And then we'll just kind of linearize all of this here. So to bring it down, so let's say your car is starting at about 50 degrees is the coolant temperature, then we'll just have 15 seconds of this extra coolant, our extra fuel that's being thrown in there. On the start extra versus temperature, once again, if your car is at 140 degrees or beyond, we don't really need to add anything extra at that point in time. So we'll set all those values to 0. And again, we'll go back and we'll just kind of start to interpolate things. We don't want to remove fuel when it's that cold, -4 degrees or so forth. So really, from 32 degrees and further, we'll go over and step right here to 50 degrees. We'll keep it at 32. And then we'll just kind of interpolate that as well. So this should, again, bring down the extra fuel that we're running in, the amount of time we're running the extra fuel at the start. Warm-up enrichment, same thing. It's going to continue to add a percentage of fuel until the car reaches a certain temperature. Right now we're saying that temperature is 176. Let's change that back. Let's say once we've reached 140, we will make all of these values above that 0. So we won't add any fuel once we've reached 140. And then let's go ahead and take this from 32 degrees coolant temperature to that 140, and we'll get that interpolated like that. Finally, the last thing we have is crank inject all. So on the first time you start the engine, what this does is it sends a pulse out of all 6 fuel injectors. That's usually needed a lot on cars that have a hard time starting, especially E85 car. Your car doesn't seem to have this problem starting, so we're going to go ahead and turn this off for right now. So we'll just send the injection out of the specified fuel injector when it starts up the engine. That's how we're going to make some changes, and we'll see how that affects our first 30 seconds of start. All right, and next we're taking a look right now at your cruise log, the log that you did doing some cruising around. And here at the top we got the O2 and the O2 target, throttle position and RPM, and then booster vacuum, coolant temperature, air temperature. So these are the 3 things we're looking at. And so I found a few things that were interesting as we've been trying to get this fuel tuning dialed in. You can see our green line and just periods of time when it's clearly just very, very lean, 17.7 AFR, and it stays there for some time. And you can see our target's way down here at 14.7. So we have to figure out what's going on and why are we running lean during these times. And then I'm also looking for times when things are kind of operating as they should. And so here, again, whenever we see the green line on top of the red line, let me just dial in here a little bit, we can see that our AFR target is 13.7, our actual AFR is about 13.89. All of this is pretty much more or less appropriate for what we'd like to see. Let's throw in one more piece of information on top of here. We'll add in the O2 feedback. We're going to see what's going on while that's happening. So we're adding some fuel here, and we're able to, with that additional fuel, 6%, so 9%, 2% is coming down here, 2%. This is nice value that we'd like to see. And here, again, we're on top of each other. What's interesting to note, here you'll see the RPMs are going up, right? We're starting out down here at about 2770, and then getting up here at the top of about 49.36. And you see we're on the throttle, about 32% on the throttle. So this is good things are happening when we're on the throttle, basically, and our RPMs are increasing. So we look here and just take some averages. Let's go right here and just kind of scope in an average of this guy right here. Yeah, so look at this right here, this period of time of on the throttle at a steady rate of 32.7. Our O2 target is 13.79. Our actual O2 is 13.65. We got some feedback of only 5.4%. Right? So that's pretty good. The RPMs from 2742 up through 4000, 55, and our boost is right there, right at about vacuum. So now if we scroll down and look at an area where obviously we were running lean, we'll get into this section right here. Let's just zoom in on a little bit where our O2 feedback is pretty much maxed out at the 14.8%, and our O2 values are reading at about 17.8 or 18 on that 14.5 target. One thing that we're seeing here is our throttle position is kind of steady. Our RPM is kind of steady at this point in time, and we're just maintaining a throttle of about 22. Let's get the averages here. I'm just going to go in and look at this whole section right here, and we can see that our O2 target is about 15. Matches directly what we want to do in the fuel map, but we're about 2 to 3 points higher on average, running about 17.8, because even the minimum was 17.38, 17.84, so just really, really lean. O2 feedback pretty much steady at 14.83. Our throttle is just maintained here at this 21.74%, and our RPM is kind of just hanging out here nicely between 3,083 and 3439. So at this point in time, where we're just kind of cruising along, maintaining the speed of the car, we seem to be running into our most difficulty maintaining AFRs within the target range that we're looking for. If we go over and look at some of our histograms, to kind of look at the whole averages from the whole entire log. So if we're looking, really here in this 3,000 to 3,500 RPM range, and let's see, our vacuum is from minus 9 psi to about minus 5 psi. Flip over and take a look at the histogram for this. We can see that again about 3,300, which is our split, and from minus 9 to about minus 4.5 psi, our average O2 or AFRs, are really right there at about 17.7 to 17.3. Across the board. So that's the average for the entire data log, not just the section that we were looking at. So we can see that this is consistent. We've been kind of dealing with this area of the fuel map and right here trying to get these values to come in range, and they've been very, very stubborn in terms of just staying here around 17, 16, 17 AFR. If we go and look at the O2 feedback value, again, it's adding the maximum in this area, about 14.8. That's the most fuel that we're running off of the short-term feedback. So again, we're going to continue to try to add fuel here. So far, we've added fuel to essentially address the amount of AFR error that we've got. So again, we'll look at the AFR error percentage. We can see, again, we're running at about, right down here at about 15%. Leaner than we should be. Some areas have come in line, looking better, even with the O2 feedback. When we're sitting here at about 100 here, this is good. Still kind of lean all the way down here, though, and across here, though. So we get better as we get toward vacuum and get toward boost. Things are much more in line, but still, in this whole area of vacuum, and higher RPMs, we're still struggling to add more fuel. So we're going to take another pass at it. We're going to add still more fuel here to match these. And we're going to see if we're going to get any improvement in this area. If we continue to not get improvement, then we have to try to investigate something on the mechanical side that's defeating our ability to add more fuel in here and get the results that we're looking for. So give us a shot on revision 008, and we'll see that we have improvements on the that first 30 seconds of start, and we'll see if we can get some improvement on this cruising fuel and discuss where to go from there.